10 things that make no sense about Palpatine and the Sith. Emperor Palpatine and the Sith exist as some of the most powerful and predominant villains in the entire Star Wars franchise. However, there are still some elements about their overall legacy and activities that are pretty confusing. In the Star Wars canon, the Dark Lords of the Sith are merciless wielders of the dark side. Likewise, it was Palpatine who finally secured the Sith's revenge against the Jedi in the prequel trilogy with the rise of his galactic empire. That said, here are some of the biggest questions and most confusing things about Palpatine and the Sith. According to the Sith's rule of two, a Sith apprentice was expected to eventually become powerful enough to kill their master. This would then make them the new Sith master, who'd begin training an apprentice of their very own, and the murderous cycle continues. However, it begs the question of why a Sith master would willingly train someone meant to kill them. A prime example is Darth Palpatine, who taught Palpatine everything he knew, resulting in his own death when Sidious killed his Sith master in his sleep. All in all, it seems pretty counterintuitive for wielders of the dark side who are obsessed with retaining their power to knowingly bring about their own demise. Even if it's a part of the rules, why would the Sith play by those rules to begin with? Following Darth Bane's creation of the Rule of Two, the Sith largely went into hiding for 1,000 years, culminating with Palpatine's successful revenge plot that ended both the Jedi Order and the Republic. However, there have been questions as to why it took a full millennium to make the Sith's revenge finally happen. There were so many previous generations of Sith before Palpatine and Darth Vader, so what were these earlier rule of two Sith Lords doing in the shadows? It's a concept that would be fascinating to learn more about, as it's only been minimally teased in the canon with Darth Plagueis' brief appearance in The Acolyte and the prequels. Palpatine was clearly the puppet master behind the galaxy-wide corruption of the Republic Senate, the Trade Federation, and other key governing systems, all of which contributed to his transformation of the Republic into his own galactic empire by the end of Revenge of the Sith. However, it's been implied that the seeds of corruption were planted long before Sidious' time, raising questions about just how long the Sith had been influencing galactic politics from the shadows. In Legends, we know that Darth Plagueis played a large role in the corruption of galactic politics. Perhaps the same could be true in the official canon, and perhaps even further back. After all, there is 1,000 years of Sith activity under the Rule of Two we know hardly anything about. Assuming these Rule of Two era Sith weren't just sitting in the shadows doing absolutely nothing, one has to wonder how they went undetected for so long, to the point that these Sith were believed to be extinct ahead of Darth Maul's first duel with Qui-Gon Jinn in The Phantom Menace. Of course, the galaxy is a vast place, and there were only ever two Sith at a time. Likewise, the Acolyte series showed the ruthlessly violent strides Kimmer, aka the Stranger, took to maintain his anonymity once he was discovered by multiple Jedi Knights 100 years before The Phantom Menace. Nevertheless, 1,000 years is a long time for the Sith to remain in the shadows, and only having two active Sith at a time feels like a pretty risky means of ensuring the continuation of their dark side legacy. By all accounts, Count Dooku was not stupid. Before he became Palpatine's apprentice during the Clone Wars, he was a Jedi Master and a political idealist who recognized the Republic's corruption for what it was, eventually becoming the leader of the Separatist movement. Likewise, we know from Attack of the Clones that Dooku was interested in destroying Palpatine if given the chance, so why didn't he see his master's betrayal coming in Revenge of the Sith when Palpatine goaded Anakin into beheading him? We know Sith betrayal is an expected part of the gig, so it's odd that Dooku seemed so surprised right before his demise. It's pretty ironic that Palpatine hates lightsabers so much when he was proven to be incredibly good at lightsaber combat, taking out multiple Jedi Masters with ease in Revenge of the Sith. Canonical comics have made it clear that the Sith specifically used lightsabers as a dark symbol meant to mock the Jedi, so this is likely why Palpatine preferred other methods of attack, like Force lightning. However, it still feels odd given his ruthless skill point. One of the most aggravating narrative blind spots in the prequels and Clone Wars is all the time the Jedi Order spent not suspecting that Palpatine was the Sith Lord they'd been looking for. By the time they started getting suspicious in Revenge of the Sith, it was far too late. While Palpatine's ability to cloud his presence in the Force played a huge part in his ability to remain anonymous to the Jedi, One could argue that many of the public actions he took would have been enough to warrant a more in-depth investigation, as expected from a Sith apprentice. It's been confirmed that Darth Vader tried and failed multiple times to betray and kill Palpatine. Combined with Palpatine's confirmed ability to foresee the future, questions about why he couldn't foresee his ultimate demise on the second Death Star are more than warranted. The best guess is that it was a combination of Palpatine's blinding overconfidence, as well as Vader and Luke's bond as father and son, leading to Anakin's surprising redemption. This perhaps caught Palpatine off guard as something he likely thought was an impossibility, and thus didn't account for. Whatever the full reason, it's still a somewhat odd moment considering how much of the future Palpatine had foreseen and planned for previously in the Star Wars timeline. Whether it was dueling Mace Windu in Revenge of the Sith, Darth Vader in Return of the Jedi, or Rey Skywalker in Rise of Skywalker, Palpatine continues to blast Force lightning even as it's reflected and actively killing him. It's never really been specified why Palpatine didn't just turn off the lightning and resort to some other Force power. Following his demise at the end of Return of the Jedi, it took 30 years for Palpatine to fully return to the Star Wars galaxy with his Sith Eternal cult and Final Order. We know the Emperor had his contingency plans and schemes to circumvent death long before he actually died. Was he just waiting for the Final Order fleet to be built? Were there unforeseen delays in the process created through Project Necromancer? Hopefully, the full breakdown of Palpatine's 30-year interim period in the shadows will one day be revealed.